shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello, it's me, Laurence Fox, in for Nigel for one last night. Thank you for having me. I'm making sure we're going to go out with a bang. So coming up, we'll debate whether we need more anonymity for those accused of serious crimes or less. I'll also discuss the sacking of NHS nurse who said those who voted for the Tories should not be resuscitated. I got killed for this on Twitter today, but we'll go into that later. And Premier League legend Matt Le Tissier joins me as Gary Neville joins, a Qatari state-run broadcaster. You know, the ones with the horrendous human rights record, where the gays are tortured. And on Talking Pints, the heroic police whistleblower Maggie Oliver will talk to me over a white wine. But first, the news with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Laurence. Here's the latest from the GB Newsroom. Prince Harry and Elton John are among a group of people suing the publisher of the Daily Mail over what lawyers are describing as gross breaches of privacy. Now, warning, but for those watching on television, the following footage contains flashing images. The lawsuit alleges that Associated Newspapers hired private investigators to secretly place listening devices inside people's cars and homes. It also claims that private phone calls were recorded and sensitive medical and financial information obtained using impersonation and manipulation. The mother of murdered teenager Stephen Laurence is also a claimant, along with Elizabeth Hurley and Sadie Frost. Associated Newspapers has refuted the claims, describing them as preposterous. 3-hour blackouts could be introduced across the UK this winter if the country fails to secure enough natural gas. The warning from the National Grid electricity system operator comes as Europe struggles with restricted energy supplies caused by Russia's war with Ukraine. The Liberal Democrats are calling on the government to hold an emergency Cobra meeting to address the issue. However, the Prime Minister says the UK can get through the winter.
We're working very hard on energy security. It's one of the reasons I'm here in Prague today. We have interconnectors with our European partners. We're working on more gas supplies. We're working on building out nuclear energy, building out wind energy, so we do have a secure supply of energy.
Well, earlier on, Liz Truss called on European leaders to unite, saying that Russian aggression has caused the, quote, biggest crisis since the Second World War. She's urged the group to address the fundamental causes of energy and migration challenges. The Prime Minister also held a meeting with her French counterpart, describing President Emmanuel Macron as a friend, and said they will work closely to create energy security. UK banks are calling on the Chancellor to extend the government's mortgage guarantee scheme amid surging interest rates. The scheme protects banks against losses when lending to first-time buyers. The average 5-year fixed-rate mortgage is now more than 6%. That's the highest level for more than a decade. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says it's a direct result of Kwasi Kwarteng's mini-budget.
We had a kamikaze mini-budget 2 weeks ago. As a direct consequence, mortgages are going up, and not by a little. You know, hundreds of pounds. £500 is the average per month. Now, there are not many people, not many families that can afford that kind of increase. Sometimes these things happen because of some world event. This is self-inflicted.
At least 38 people have been killed, including 22 children, after a former police officer opened fire at a childcare centre in the northeast of Thailand. Police say the gunman had been discharged from the force last year and just hours earlier had appeared in court on drugs charges. The gunman also killed his wife and his child before taking his own life. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Back now to Laurence with Farage.
Good evening. Our new Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has announced that she is considering granting anonymity to men suspected of rape in order to avoid what has been described as trial by media. Several high-profile cases have arisen in recent years, from Cliff Richard, Paul Gambaccini and Harvey Proctor, all falsely accused by men of sexual assault. So this is not a man versus woman thing. That's not a point I'm making. And that's not to mention the countless thousands without a media profile who, despite being innocent, have forever lost the thing that all men should and do hold most dear, their good name, in the same way that women should and do hold most dear their dignity and self-respect. Long after innocence is established, these men will still struggle to rebuild their lives. Sideways glances at parties, mumblings of the lack of smoke without fire from colleagues at work, the slow murder of one's good name can become unbearable. The process becomes the punishment. It's a punishment many men can ultimately not bear, so they choose instead to end their own suffering, tragically. Now look, the argument against this proposal, of course, is that women will be fearful of coming forward or being taken seriously when they make allegations which they may fear are not taken seriously, therefore leading to sexual predators like Harvey Weinstein becoming ever more emboldened to continue their vile sprees of abuse. And this is a compelling argument, and there is no doubt that everything should be done to protect and encourage women to speak out in what must be the most agonizing and vulnerable time of their lives. But it is almost impossible to find a correct balance. Both walking through life with the living death of being the victim of rape and walking through life with the living death of falsely being accused of rape seem to be so difficult to weigh as to not bear thinking about. Perhaps the solution can be found higher up the chain, and when a judgment falls on one side or the other, the punishment for both egregious crimes should be the same. If a man is found to have committed a vile and life-changing act, then his sentence should be as harsh as society demands. And on the same note, if someone is found to have lied about an alleged rape, their sentence should match his to the day -1, because rape is worse than a lie. This way, both parties will have a living reminder of justice being seen to be done, and those contemplating such evil acts may in some way take pause, God willing. But then, as with all things, there is another side to the story. I am contacted frequently, almost on a daily basis, by men in abject despair about their treatment at the hands of the family court system, where anonymity is the cornerstone of the process. This is to protect children from the situation their parents unenviably find themselves in. But there is, however, a problem with anonymity here. Just as men are the overwhelming perpetrators of rape, women are the overwhelming accusers of domestic abuse and child alienation once proceedings commence. Anonymity provides a person, either woman or man, the temptation, the opportunity to supercharge allegations against the other party. The cloak of anonymity here emboldens the vexatious party in the knowledge that there will be no repercussions for unfounded allegations. Publicity, as Jeremy Bentham wrote, is the very soul of justice, and perhaps he is right. They say that sunlight is the best disinfectant. Lies, like vampires, hate sunlight, just as the truth loves light and thrives within it. So tonight, I am asking you, should we have more anonymity or less in the legal process? As usual, let me know your thoughts. Get in touch by emailing me at farage@gbnews.uk or tweet using the hashtag Farage on GB News. Right, My first guest is criminal barrister Diana Constantine, and I'm delighted to have her on the show to discuss her thoughts on anonymity. Diana, good evening.
Hello, good evening, Laurence.
Could you talk me through the legal repercussions of anonymity and why it is in place in the legal process more broadly?
Indeed, you said something very correct. You said that justice needs to be seen to be done. So the overarching principle here is that the defendant must receive a fair trial. And that is well established in our domestic law, but it's also enshrined in Article 6 of the European Convention of Human Rights. Today at your show, you're going to hear from both sides. So we have the victim side and we have also the defendant who's been falsely accused. And the law has to make sure that it encompasses both of those situations and scenarios. So we have the victim perspective and the defendant's perspective. You very correctly pointed out that the victims, they do suffer emotional and physical abuse. And it is a difficult stage to actually accept that and go and complain and make a report to the police. Now, from the defendant's perspective, if they have been falsely accused, of course, it does have overwhelming implications into their life, especially when the media is there on the spotlight. So the principle the principle of anonymity is to protect the victims and to make sure that they do come forward and report those cases. Now, what can we do about it? We have the Sexual Offences Amendment Act 1976 that provides a lifelong anonymity to victims. That was the law that allowed for the defendants to have anonymity, but it has been repealed in the Criminal Justice Act 1988. So the question is, do the defendants still have the right to anonymity? And it is simply no. They do not have that right anymore, but it was back then in the case. So it may well be the case for us to look what happened back in 1976, what the Parliament thought about it, and what statistic analysis they had to allow that to happen.
Thank you very much for that very clear definition of what's going on. Thank you, criminal barrister Diane Constantine. Thank you. I am now joined in the studio by actor and sexual abuse survivor Stuart Anthony and Harvey Proctor, former Conservative MP who was falsely accused and never charged of sexual assault. Good evening, both of you. For the audience's sake, could you just quickly outline what happened to you in what your experience was?
Of course, yeah. So I was abused as a child between the ages of 10 and 14. Didn't come forward straight away, left it many years, 20 odd years before I came forward. Then my abuser abused a 4-year-old child. Then I came forward. He was then sentenced to 4 years for that crime. I came forward because I felt so much guilt that if I'd come forward 20 years ago, that wouldn't have happened to him. So that's what happened. He was charged when I came forward. No, actually, the CPS didn't authorise a charge at first. They said there wasn't enough evidence. Then 2 other people came forward and it went to court 7 years later. So I came forward in 2016. It finally got to court last year. He was sentenced this May to 18 years for 21 counts of sexual abuse, sexual assault and rape.
Well done you for coming forward and waiving your rights to anonymity. Harvey, what are your feelings on this?
Well, I think my case is pretty well known. I was accused of sexual rape and abuse and torture and murder of children. The police, before they started their investigation, held a press conference at Scotland Yard, it was the Metropolitan Police, to say that my accuser was credible and true. He was not credible and true. A long story, but I think most people know it. But my accuser is now serving 18 years in prison for perverting the course of justice. However, through the police, backed up by certain politicians, including Tom Watson, who, alas, I see is trying to get a peerage again, having been turned down 2 years ago. He's trying to get a peerage again. Certain sectors of the media, because of that, I lost my job, I lost my home, I lost my repute, I received death threats to the extent that I had to go and live for a period of time abroad. So I strongly believe that there should be anonymity before charge, and the law with regard to suspects and victims should be on an even keel. For this purpose, commenting on what your previous speaker said, the lawyer, I am a victim of these matters. I have the utmost respect and support and sympathy for people who have, like Stuart, been abused. Genuine people, but not the liars.
How you've just described in a very stoic way what you went through. How has that affected you emotionally in your life? Do you feel that your life is torn apart and you are able to fulfill this?
I think about it every day. Yeah. I have said before, I will be thinking about it on my deathbed.
I pray you won't.
No, yeah, I feel the same, actually, you know.
How do you feel?
It's very hard because when I went to the police, I started speaking and you know, the first sentence came out and then it was just spewing from my mouth. I couldn't stop. I just wanted to tell them everything because I wanted somebody to believe me. Just anybody, just one person. And I knew that as soon as one person believed me, that was it. That was enough for me. Even if it didn't go to court, I just wanted someone to put their arm around me and say, do you know what, Stuart, I believe you. I believe this happened.
But it seems to me what was happening, which is slightly different here, is what you were doing was coming to terms with something and acting in order to protect others.
Yes.
From the same thing.
Yeah.
What happened to Harvey, which seems deliberate, calculated, malevolent,
Absolutely.
and malicious.
Yeah.
And I have to come down on the side of Harvey to say that anonymity is, I mean, it's a very complex issue, but how dare somebody describe someone as a credible? You know, we've had a lot of people described as credible in this world.
Credible and true. Yeah. That's what the Metropolitan Police said before they'd even started to investigate.
And how, sorry to interrupt you, how have the Metropolitan Police offered you an unreserved apology? Have they contacted you to...
I received, after about a year after the conclusion of Operation Midland, an apology. I had to take a lot of time and money to sue the Metropolitan Police for the damages that they caused me financially. Put on one side the emotional things, but the financial damages. And I did win mediation against a very reluctant Metropolitan Police Service who didn't want to know. My solicitors advised me that my losses, even after mediation, even after settlement, the cost of operation to me financially is £500,000.
Unbelievably unaffordable. So let's wrap this up.
But just on the issue of anonymity, I do believe that there will be certain limited circumstances where the police or the CPS think it is important to put a person's name into the public arena. But if they so think that, then it should not be for the police to be acting as judge and jury in their own case, their own court. They should have to go to a High Court judge, set out the reasonings that they think that name should go in the public arena, and get the judge to agree. They shouldn't do it themselves. They shouldn't, as in my case, a police officer, one of 20, who was in my house for what's now been found to be illegal searches of my house, to go into my bedroom, to ring my accuser, who they knew was in touch with the media, and tell him that he was searching my house. That should not be allowed and should be a criminal offence. That police officer should have been prosecuted.
I agree with you 100%. Our police force and the Metropolitan Police are absolutely, completely politicised and out of control. And I'm absolutely appalled and sorry for what's happened to you. Stuart, do you have any last words? And any advice to people who are suffering abuse and who want to speak out?
talk to somebody, anybody, if it be a friend, a family member, just anybody that you feel you can trust. It doesn't have to always be the police. It doesn't always have to be leading to a conviction. It's being able to talk about it, that weight off your shoulders. For me, the weight was lifted massively, and I'm now able to move on with my life.
Well, I'm so glad to meet two people with two such different experiences, and I think we're all on the same page here. All right, thank you so much,
very
both
much.
of you, Harvey Proctor and
Thank
Stuart Anthony. Wow. Right. The left are quick to cancel anyone who has opinions or makes comments others may find offensive, and now they're getting a taste of their own medicine. A former NHS nurse, Miranda Hughes, was seen on a TV. I got rinsed for this on Twitter for defending her today, by the way, which is rare for me. I usually get killed. For saying, if you voted Conservative, you don't deserve to be resuscitated by the NHS, which is why I would never go into hospital without a friend. Now, I should point out that she has apologised, but despite the fact that she has lost her job, apparently due to a media policy set down by the private healthcare provider she worked for, she spoke to GB News yesterday, and here's what she had to say.
I do apologise for saying it completely, but I think the problem is I've underestimated people's ability to actually understand a joke.
So that's how you see it. It was a joke.
Obviously, it was a joke.
Joining me to discuss this is writer and broadcaster Emma Webb. Emma, good evening. Should there be limits to free speech?
No, absolutely not. And I don't think anybody should ever be fired for expressing their opinion or their view on anything. And I know that actually this is interestingly, this issue has divided free speech activists. You mentioned getting rinsed on Twitter. And I think that the reason why is that this is slightly more nuanced than some other cases, because in this instance, I don't think that she should have lost her job, to make that clear. But I do think that there would have been reason for any hospital that she worked for, any company that she worked for in healthcare, to be concerned about those remarks, because that wasn't just straightforwardly expressing a political opinion. That was expressing an opinion that brought into doubt whether she could be trusted to care for the lives of patients. And so I think in that case, actually, there's another aspect to this, which is that anybody who may have expressed conservative opinions or known to be conservative, known to be a Tory, would in her care feel that they were uncomfortable or in danger. And so that has another aspect to it. So I think actually what is at stake here is that you mentioned the way that the left often react in trying to cancel people, that actually we're in this sort of situation where it's either all or nothing, and we've lost any sense of due process. What should have probably happened in this case was that she be given the benefit of the doubt, and that her employers would look into whether or not she was actually safe to have on the front line working directly with patients, rather than to have a knee-jerk reaction and fire her. The reason that they've given, like you said, is that she did something that was out of line with a policy about going on television. And that may be the case, but if it is the case that she's been fired simply for expressing these opinions, and maybe she was in the heat of the moment on television saying something that perhaps she didn't entirely mean, I think she should be given the benefit of the doubt for that. No one should be fired for their job, but I think we need to recognise that in this case, there's a reason why free speech activists are divided.
Well, I just find it amazing that the left want us all to be not resuscitated, but there we are. Thank you, writer and broadcaster Emma Webb. Good evening. Right, coming up after the break, with the World Cup just weeks away, we'll be joined by football legend Matt Le Tissier to talk about whether Labour activist Gary Neville is a hypocrite for accepting a job at a Qatari broadcaster for the upcoming World Cup. Is a hypocrite, yes. Back in a moment.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello and welcome back. At the start of the show, I asked you, should we have more anonymity or less? As Suella Braverman announced, she is considering granting anonymity to men suspected of rape. Robin says, until convicted, an individual should remain anonymous. It is the fundamental principle of a fair justice system. I have to say I sort of lean that way. Andrew says, innocent until proven guilty. Always, yes. Nowadays it's guilty until proven innocent in our new modern woke world. Carl says, it is nice that they're bringing back innocent until proven guilty. People in the West don't understand how British this concept is. In the most of the world, for the longest time, you're arrested and you must prove your innocence. Yes, it is a fundamental difference. Marcus says, if they're suspected and haven't been charged and found guilty, they should have anonymity. Why should they be attached forever to something they may not have done? David says, actual criminals need to be named and shamed. Well, it's fair to say that everybody is sort of in agreement on tonight, which is quite interesting for once for me on those comments. Right. It is also fair to say that the nation's economy is facing numerous challenges at the moment, and the new government's plan to tackle those issues has already, in part, hit the rocks. Evidence of this can be seen in the increasing mortgage rate rises in the UK, which have risen to 6% for two-year fixed-rate deals, and income taxes are also set to rise to 21 billion, despite that government's new fiscal plans, which means that the average UK household could be up to £1,450 worse off. Joining me to discuss the nation's economic woes and the government's plan to tackle them is Ben Habib, CEO of First Property Group and former Brexit Party MEP. Ben, do you feel the course of action taken by the Chancellor and the Prime Minister is the right one?
Absolutely right one. The
Why?
only mistake they made was buckling over that cut in the higher rate of tax.
Why?
Why was
it a mistake?
Well, first of all, it was never an economic issue. The cost of cutting that tax was $2 billion a year, which pales into insignificance compared to the 150 billion cap on energy prices, the 20-odd billion reversal of Sunak's decision to increase corporation tax, the 12 billion a year on national insurance, which they reversed.
But what does it say to? But what does it say?
What it says
to the people?
What it says,
giving the millionaires the money. Come on.
But it's not giving millionaires money.
I know it's not practically giving the millionaires money, but does it say to the people, look, guys, we've got the rich people covered?
No, but the point about economic growth, which is where Liz Truss wants to take the economy, is you don't make the poorer richer by making the richer poorer. What you've got to do is set an environment in which the rich wish to move and live in the move to and live in the United Kingdom.
And invest.
And invest and put their money here, which is why you need low corporation tax rates, you need relatively low income tax rates versus Europe, versus Singapore, versus the US. And it's also why she removed the cap on bonuses. Why would you have a cap on bonuses if that deters the youngest and the brightest financial bods to come to London? We want them here, don't we? Now, the Europeans love that kind of thing because they have an essentially socialist model. You start, before we discuss the economy, you were talking about, innocent and proven guilty. And it's the same principle, almost, with the way we approach business in this country. The Europeans have a very structured, highly regulated system. We don't. Our principles are one of, you can do whatever you want unless there isn't a law against it. And that's a much better way to go forward. So the cap on bonuses was always a regressive step. It was a controlling step. It was a European kind of concept. And we had to get rid of it.
And against the fundamentals of democracy, which is you have active rights and passive rights. And one of your active rights is you can go and make as much money as you want. And good luck to you, buddy.
Absolutely. It's not the government paying these bankers their bonuses. It's private enterprises who are going to pay the bonuses. And, it also reminds me about one of your major bugbears, which is the right to freedom of speech. Well, the right to earn and spend your own money is the other side of that same coin. The control of free speech and the control of how you spend your money, and a large state, an interventionist state, they're all part of the same thing, aren't they, Laurence?
They are. We've backed and forth on this anyway, because we are upstairs from each other in different offices. Yeah. But I think something had to change. We're in a position of no growth, no interest rates, nothing was happening for 10 or more years. And she's gone, right, we've got to do this.
Absolutely.
Because post-Brexit, we were told Britain is going to get back control of its future. And what we've had is nothing. So whatever Liz Truss, whether you agree with her or disagree with her, she's actually come out with a vision.
She's come out with it. And it's very courageous because she's doing something that politicians don't typically do, which is to give up power back to the people. I don't want to hark back to Maggie because Maggie was a...
I love her.
But Maggie was a solution for the problems we faced 40 years ago, and people keep wanting to draw parallels between Maggie and what we're doing now. What Liz Truss is doing is just basic common sense. We've had 12 years of Conservative government, which has been effectively... I think someone like Michael Gove would call it compassionate conservatism. I'd call it socialism.
Waste of time.
Yeah, he is a waste of time, by the way. He's made the calculation that his time in frontline politics is over.
He loves getting that knife out, doesn't he?
He's going to be a naysayer.
He goes, who am I going to stab this month? Why don't you just serve people? Anyway.
Yeah, so we've had 12 years of an increasingly large state borrowing more money to deliver what it believes to be the right agenda for the British people and taxing very heavily on the way. We've got taxes at a 70-year high. We've got government debt at a post-World War II high, and we've got no growth to show for it. So any Tory MP who doesn't agree with Liz Truss needs to make the case why we would continue to pursue policies that have so demonstrably failed for the last 12 years.
So why are the Conservatives trying to oust a Conservative for being a Conservative?
Because they've become a phenomenal campaigning machine and they've lost sight of governance. What they wish to do, what people like, if you're going to put a generous interpretation on what people like Michael Gove want, is to occupy that ground, that political ground which would be otherwise occupied by Labour. They want to push Labour out of any prospect of being elected. So they think if they can sell their brand of high taxation, large state borrowing and interventionism, they think they can push Keir Starmer out of office. What they don't realise is they're delivering Keir Starmer's agenda. So the Tories may as well not be in office. What we need is... I thought Liz Truss's speech, by the way, was brilliant, because what we need is that inculcation of aspiration, a belief that the country can go forward, that the United Kingdom is a place that you can move to, you can make money, you won't have that money stripped away from you. We're a free society, a society that believes in doing whatever you wish to do as long as it's not illegal, an aspirational society, one where there's law and order but you're not having your freedoms taken away from you. A traditional British society. That's what she wants to re-engender. And so I'm completely behind it. It's not just sensible economics, it's sensible politics.
And it's hopeful for our children.
It is. It is hopeful.
Aspirational. Ben, thank you so much.
Thank you
for coming in.
Thank you, Laurence.
Right, thank you, Ben Habib, CEO of First Property Group and my downstairs neighbour in London. Anyway, what the Fox moment tonight is former England footballer and broadcaster Gary Neville, hero of the left, in recent years has become increasingly involved in politics. It's almost like actors getting into politics, isn't it? Ridiculous. Campaigning against racism and discrimination, slamming the horrible, horrible Tories who hate the most vulnerable in society. Yet he has conveniently forgotten about Qatar's human rights abuses, which include women tied to their husbands, locking up gays and suppressing freedom of speech. So that he could sign a deal to commentate at the Qatar World Cup for beIN Sports. Joining me to discuss this peculiar conundrum and own goal from Gary Neville is fellow England and Premier League footballer Matt Le Tissier. Matt, good evening.
Good evening, Laurence. How are you?
Was Gary Neville always like this?
That's a good question, actually. Always like what? Are you suggesting always been a hypocrite? Is that what you're suggesting?
Matt, I wouldn't want to put words in your mouth. But was he always politically active in the dressing room and, in club life?
Well, I think he was always very vocal, from what I hear in the Manchester United change room. I think he may have been the PFA rep at Manchester United, as far as I'm aware. I stand to be corrected on that if I'm not right. But yes, I think he's always been very vocal in his views, which is all well and good. I don't have a problem with that. I've been quite vocal with my views over the last couple of years. So fair play to him for standing up for what he thinks is right. However, sometimes, when you get put in a position like this, sometimes you just got to hold your hand up, I think, and say, do you know what? Every man has his price.
Yeah, well, I think the punters look at footballers and go, I mean, actually, you're one of the rare exceptions because you stayed at Southampton for all that time, and I don't think you ended up on 100 grand a week or anything like that. But is it weird that these flash footballers are acting in this morally superior way until the money is right, and then they throw all that out the window?
As I said, Laurence, I think every man has his price, and obviously Gary is being paid enough money for him to actually say, well, do you know what, I might be able to turn a blind eye to this, or he probably thinks that he'll be able to raise issues. I don't know. He may want to sit on beIN and raise issues that he thinks are worth talking about. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work, but good luck to him if he does do it. And I'll be the first one to pat him on the back if he does bring up those issues whilst working in Qatar.
Or maybe he could do what Lewis Hamilton does, which is wear a pride flag on his helmet and not talk about it. But do you think that modern day footballers, have to sort of join the woke mob? Otherwise, their chances of a career outside of football in commentating and everything else is done. And also, sorry to add another question to it, we've now read that we're going back to taking the knee. What are we taking the knee to? What are they taking the knee to?
I'm not quite sure that they even know, quite frankly. But when you get players like Wilfried Zaha deciding not to take the knee, then I think that's a bit of a sign that actually it's probably not doing the job that it was perhaps intended to do. In fact, it may be doing the opposite of what its intention was. When it gets to that stage, then I think you have to review the way you do things, and I think there's better ways of doing things that can possibly stop racism in sport.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, England and Premier League legend Matt Le Tissier. Right.
Thanks, Laurence.
Back to some of your reactions to the question of the evening: should we have more anonymity or less in the legal system? One viewer says, not a bad idea. Being suspected doesn't mean you're guilty. Exactly. Common sense. Megan says, anonymity until charged. Right, everyone's on side tonight. Amazing. Margaret says, that is a great idea, as many innocent people's lives have been ruined by false claims. Wow, everyone's agreeing. Michael says, either both are anonymous or neither are. Amen. Another viewer says, we should all be considered innocent until proven guilty by evidence. Absolutely. Isn't that interesting? Everybody is on side with this idea of maintaining the fundamental Western right of innocence until proven guilty. We're very slowly walking down this woke march to guilty until proven innocent. And it's very good to hear from the viewers that we're all on side. Right, coming up in the GB News Tavern, the doors are open and we will be speaking to the victim's advocate and former detective constable with Greater Manchester Police, Maggie Oliver. We will be back after this.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello. The GB News Tavern is open for me for the last time for Talking Pints. I am joined by the wonderful Maggie Oliver, founder of the Maggie Oliver Foundation, an organisation that empowers and supports the victims and survivors of sexual abuse. Maggie, cheers. My first white wine guest.
Cheers, Laurence.
How are you doing?
I'll be a lot better after this.
Can I ask you a question which has always bothered me? Why do they call them grooming gangs when they're not grooming gangs?
Because I think that language is important, and it plays down the magnitude of what these abusers, they are rapists, and they are destroying lives of countless children. So grooming really doesn't do justice to what they do, because, you know, the work that I do now in the Maggie Oliver Foundation, we're trying to help victims and survivors put their lives back together every single day. And the damage that child abuse does to any child that goes through it is actually, in many ways, it will stay with that person forever. But they are rapists.
And because we've interacted on TV before, and you made this point, which is stuck in my head to this day, which is you said you can't deal with a problem unless you name the problem. Unless you say, this is what is happening and this is who is doing it.
Yeah.
Why are we so frightened in this country to turn around and say, this is what is happening and this is who is doing it?
Because I think we tiptoe around the truth. I remember, you know, I gave 16 years of my life to being a police officer. I believe in justice. I believe in the criminal justice system. But what I saw was, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And when I first started to speak out, nobody would refer to the ethnicity of the offenders in the grooming gangs. What I would say is that at the foundation, we deal with child abusers from all kinds of ethnicities, whether it's in the family, whether it's an uncle or a teacher or but the grooming gangs, which is what they're called, they are predominantly Pakistani Muslim men. And I remember being on the Today programme with John Humphreys, and they were always referred to as Asian grooming gangs. And I pulled him up and I said, John, they are really not. They're not from Japan and they're not from Thailand. They are predominantly Pakistani Muslim men from a particular part of Pakistan. And I believe that in order to change things and put them right, we first of all have to acknowledge where the problem is. And if we are not even going to speak that truth, then how are we ever going to address it? I want to open up the conversation within that community. I mean, in the foundation, we are actually supporting some women who are being abused within their own community. They are terrified of coming to us, but they will not go to the police because they are stigmatised. It's a really complicated situation. But we're not very much further on now than we were 10 years ago, except now we have awareness. And if there's one thing that I think I'm fairly proud of, is that I opened up this subject to the country. The Drama 3 girls that, I was the programme consultant on, it doesn't go far enough. It lets the police off very easily, it lets the CPS off very easily. But what it did do, it educated the country in what was happening to generations of young white girls throughout mostly the north of England. And I think that was the first step. We still have chief constables. We still have those at the top of these organisations still trying to say these are problems of the past. These are historical problems. Everything now is hunky-dory. Well, I'm telling you, and anybody who's listening, that is not true, because every single day in the foundation, we're not only supporting survivors who are long since beyond the criminal justice system, we're approached every day by victims who today are going to the police and trying to get their rapists prosecuted. They struggle. We all know that policing and the criminal justice system is in a complete and utter mess. There's a lack of training, there's not enough investment.
Well, there's also an obsession with this idea of anti-racism. I remember when I stood for London Mayor, I asked the Metropolitan Police representative who asked to meet the mayoral candidates, I said, are you an anti-racist organisation? He said, absolutely. And there was a sort of commitment in his eyes, which was so ideological and weird. And I was like, why are you not focusing on just solving crime, number one, for the taxpayer, so that we feel safe? It must be very... It's so interesting listening to what you're saying, because you're taking out of the biggest darkness that there is a hope and an optimism that you want to bring to people. So you're talking about the Maggie Oliver Foundation will take anybody who is the victim of abuse.
Anybody.
So it's not like you're targeting specifically British Pakistani men who have a slightly different cultural attitude to the treatment of women. You're turning around and going, these are the facts, we will accept anybody, and we will work and help you to build a better life. And is that the antidote to the politicking around this?
Yeah, I mean, I really don't get drawn into the debate about racism because it's irrelevant to me. If a man rapes a child of 11 or 12, and, on the Rochdale case, we even had a fetus. I don't care where that rapist comes from. I don't care if he's a priest in the Catholic Church. I don't care if he's a Pakistani Muslim taxi driver. I don't care if he's my next door neighbour. Child abuse is wrong. And if we do not stand up and say that openly as a country, what we are doing, we are allowing them to continue, and we are failing the children who have nowhere else to go. But in the foundation, they can come to us and we will fight their corner. And am I allowed to swear?
Yes, swear away. No.
Can I not? No. I won't say anything really bad. All right, I won't swear. Well, I don't care
say bleeping.
Who I upset. I will speak the truth, and sometimes the truth hurts. And where my anger goes is to chief constables, to the Home Secretary, to politicians who have knowingly turned away from this problem for decades.
Cowardly.
Yeah, they've. I call it willful blindness, or keep it under the carpet. I didn't know that this. I'm known for grooming gangs. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when I first resigned, I can't tell you how naive I was then. I'm not naive anymore. My blinkers are well and truly off, and we are there to fight for those who will be ignored, but they're not alone. we're supported by the public. You know, we don't have money from the police, from the government, because I don't want anybody to be able to say to me, you can't say that, or we're going to withhold. So if the public don't support us, we will not be here anymore. So, but we are there to fight alongside any victim of sexual abuse, whether it's somebody.
As you quite rightly pointed out, the Catholic Church reformed itself in a small way, but it reformed itself. It acknowledged its sins of the past, and it said we were moving priests around and not dealing with the problem. So there is a problem here, and this problem needs reforming. We need to, as a country, we need to go. We are a multicultural country, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
And we have to turn around and say, guys, these are the values. This is what Britain stands on.
Yeah.
And you don't get to rape white girls. It's just not.
No, I mean, what I always say, Laurence, is that, and I might get the quote wrong, but, you know, all it takes for evil to survive is that good people do nothing.
The good men to do nothing. The good stand idly by.
Yeah, so, you know, everybody who sees this, stand up and shout that it's wrong. You know, the community from within which the abusers come in this particular kind of crime, I want to work with that community because there are good people in there. Some of them are frightened, but I would like to see them speaking out about it. The other part of this problem for me is those at the top of organisations who do not think it's worth putting the resources in, because let's face it, many of these victims are from very difficult backgrounds. You know, they're not Boris Johnson's daughter or kids, you know, they're not his children.
People are battling in Spain.
Yeah,
people are all of them
all over the show. And I remember the Chief Constable in Greater Manchester, when I began to speak out, Peter Fye, he knew, and I'm not libelling him, I'm saying what he said in the media quite openly. When I was saying, you know, what was going on, this is not right, he said that I was a woman who would become too emotionally involved. I had lost...
Isn't that misogynistic as well?
Yeah, I was bereaved. You know, all those things. Now, I would like to see chief constables held criminally to account when they do not do what their duty is. Because like me, I promise to uphold the law, to protect the vulnerable, to act with impartiality, uphold fundamental human rights. What they have done in these cases is the complete opposite of that. And they are guilty, in my mind, of gross criminal neglect, misconduct in a public office. And I want to see one of them standing in a court of law, facing prison. And I can guarantee that we would never see these failures again, because everybody would be looking at their big fat pension and walking out the door. I don't blame police officers on the ground. They are, you know, trying to juggle monumental crime queues. They are not paid properly anymore. There is a skills gap. They are not being trained. We are policing on the cheap. We've got victims waiting 5 years to get to a trial. Go on my Twitter, Maggie Oliver UK, go on my LinkedIn. I'm sharing stories virtually every day of another victim being failed, and it is the system that is failing them and pretending that they're not. And I want those people to be shouting out. Senior social workers, council workers, not another review.
You sense that there's a coming need for it. Now, can I just say thank you for my copy of Maggie Oliver, Fighting for Justice, Survivors. Where can people get this?
On Amazon. Go to our website, www.themaggieoliverfoundation.com. We share survivor stories, we share examples of failures. You can volunteer with us, you can donate to us, you can fundraise, there's all sorts on there.
Well, what's so great is that out of a load of pain and darkness and suffering, you're bringing hope. And to that, you are my hero.
Oh, thank you,
Maggie,
Lauren.
It's such a pleasure to meet you.
Likewise, thank you.
For one last time, it's Outfox the Fox. Thankfully, I have Maggie here to help me. One viewer asked, can the police ever regain the trust of the public? I would say, so here's my answer, and I'll get Maggie's one later, is get off your political symbols. Get off your little rainbow badges and your lanyards and your support of certain ideology. Maggie?
Yeah, that they need to do... It goes to the top. So support those at the bottom, train them, pay them properly, and then you will... you know, get back to where we were perhaps 20 years ago.
Oh, look, I've got my last question. How have you found working at GB News so far? Right, I'll tell you something about GB News. GB News is the most wonderful place to work because whenever I've opened my mouth and said I want to talk about this, they've said, cool, let me help you. And I think GB News is the hope of British television actually moving forward, and I hope that more and more people watch it, which they have done this week, and I feel absolutely flattered and honoured that so many of you tuned in to watch me, and I am hugely grateful. Well, it is, though, sadly, all over for me because the big man is back next week. I have had such a wonderful time in the last 2 weeks, and thank you so much for everything. And I just want to say a huge thanks to Amanda, who took me in on my first day, and she said, I'll sort you out, and she just held my hand. And she is the reason behind everything brilliant here, including this show. So everyone here is sad to see her go, including me, who was known her for all of 5 minutes. Right, and I'm already in awe of her. Good luck to Amanda on her next venue. Next, it's Mark's time. Mark, I'm going to miss you. What will I do of an evening?
I'm going to miss you. I'm going to miss you too, Laurence. Actually, I hear there's all the place is rife with rumours that they're planning something called the Laurence Fox Show, which is, wait a minute, 8 p.m. Monday to Thursday? That can't be right. Is that a typing error? Anyway, I keep hearing all this talk about a permanent Laurence Fox. So say hi to Maggie for me. She is quite right that awful term grooming gangs is designed to anaesthetise the topic and not make you think of it as what it is. That was you ended on a real high, you and Maggie together there. That was terrific. We're going to try and keep it going. We got Kelvin McKenzie. We got Leilani Dowding. We got all the stuff that matters, and we're going to start talking about it right after the weather.
It's hard work.
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Friday offers some fairly typical autumnal fare. Bit of sunshine, a spell of heavy rain moving south, and some gusty winds. Low pressure to the north, high pressure to the south, and in between plenty of isobars. The winds coming in from the west, and this weather front in particular bringing some wet weather tonight across parts of Scotland. That rain could be fairly heavy, some blustery conditions as well. That rain will push into Northern Ireland and southern Scotland by dawn. Bar the odd shower further south, much of England and Wales will be dry. Be some clear spells as well, but enough of a breeze to stop temperatures falling too far. A milder night than last night, double digits to start Friday for most urban areas. It will be quite a wet start for parts of southern Scotland and Northern Ireland, and this zone of rain sinking southwards, turning things fairly wet quite quickly across northern England, parts of North Wales, before heading into the Midlands and South Wales come the afternoon. Quite a narrow band of rain, so it shouldn't last too long, but it could be pretty intense, followed by a mixture of sunshine and blustery showers. Ahead of it, East Anglia in the southeast, mostly dry for much of the day. Quite warm again, 18 or 19. But the rain will push in here, so a lot of spray and surface water around on the roads for Friday evening's commute before that zip